Master lens maker and innovator Mr. Lee of Laowa Lenses has once again taught us a new way to macro. This is a review of Laowa's new Aurogon system. For the first time since I've been doing this, a company has brought out a different kind of lens that is opening up extreme macro photography at high magnification to enthusiasts, to the rest of us. The question is, does it work? Is it any good? That's what I'm going to tell you. Stick around. This is quite a long review because there's quite a lot to talk about, because this is the first time a popular lens company has taken something like extreme magnification macro photography and tried to bring it to the masses. This was no easy task. This has always been an area of macro photography reserved for either the very rich or the very crazy, or at least the very dedicated. And this opens the door to let the rest of us in. This system, the Aurogon, is a 4-lens system, and I'll describe it in a great deal of detail in just a little bit. But it promises, for the price of one objective from a company like Mitutoyo, to bring an entire range of extreme macro photography to the masses. This lens system is a real lens. This is a real microscope lens. As I'll explain, it's not set up in the traditional way, but there is no doubt about it. It is an apochromatic, high magnification system that will rival most any microscope objective you're likely to come across, but it's doing it at a price that is insane. This review is exhaustive and was exhausting. There was a lot of testing that went into this. I have been using these lenses now for 4 months. In several places I say I've been using them for 1 month. That was the first time I recorded this video. The reason I'm still using the footage from the first recording is there was a lot of stuff in there that I couldn't say any better if I did it again, so I'm leaving it in. But things that have changed as I have got more experience with the system, I have re-recorded. But I have shot tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of individual frames using this system. And I have looked at all of the photographs very critically. And this review is based largely on that experience. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get a lot out of it. But before we get started, there's one thing I want to tell you about. I have 3 or 4 other videos around this lens system that are coming out. I have a couple of how-to videos. I've been using this out in the field, actually, at low magnification, and it is fantastic. So I'll be doing a video on that. I have a video on how to use it in the basic studio setup. And I also have a video on how to build the support system, the support rings that you need for this to work. You cannot use this without supports. One last word for anybody who orders this lens today. A friend told me that when he tried to order the lens, they didn't ask him what camera mount he needed, and they have these in all different camera mounts. So be sure that you are asked that question and you give that response. You wouldn't want to have them send you the wrong one and have to send it back. So let's get going. I'm going to start the original video with the happy music, just so that it feels right. Hello everybody, this is Alan. I'm here today to talk to you about the new Laowa Aurogon, the FF 10 to 50 times super micro apochromatic lens system. It's not a single lens, it's a system of lenses. It consists of one lens, what they call the objective lens, and 4 tube lenses. And that alone was very confusing to me as I was trying to get my head around what was going on with these lenses. The thing is, optically, this thing behaves like a very good microscope objective with a tube lens and some extension. Yet that's not what it is. I could not get these lenses to focus at infinity by themselves, which told me that there was something else going on. The something else that was going on is an entirely new design, where basically all of the magnification happens in this objective. The image that is presented to the second set of lenses, which you'll find at the end of these tubes, right in here, the second set of lenses are not like traditional tube lenses. These actually are probably the lenses that do most of the correction of the light coming out of the first lens, so that this is actually a strong positive lens that magnifies the image. And this is a weak lens that actually reduces the size of the image, allowing you to get more extension and have the image form on the sensor. So it's kind of more like a telephoto lens than it is a macro lens. Yet the result is you get 10, 20, 35, and 50 times magnification, and I measured it, and it's exactly right for all of them. Let me make one point. Let me actually make 2 points about the testing and about the overall review. The testing was done to the best of my ability without having a 50 times Mitutoyo objective or any kind of 35 times objective to compare this to. So while I was able to test this system against the 10 and 20 times magnification Mitutoyo objectives, I wasn't able to test it against any 35 times objective or any 50 times objective, but I did use this lens extensively at 35 and 50, and I will be showing you a lot of the pictures as we go through. I will let the pictures speak for themselves. I think if I was to sum it up in one word, I would say that between Mitutoyo and Laowa, the images are comparable, which is saying an awful lot to compare this brand new lens system to something that's been around for a long time and is rightly lauded as the leader in the field. This, I had a hard time distinguishing a lot of the shots. What I did was I usually, wherever possible, I completed a photograph with one system, and then I switched out the system and repeated the same photograph with the other setup. Then I would shoot another with the second setup and switch back to the first setup and keep doing that until I ran out of batteries or power or flashes. And I did that every day for a month. The testing was honest and as rigorous as I could do, but it wasn't very scientifically complete. Without the two lenses to compare to, it was pretty much just a what did I think of these lenses at 35 and 50. But also the fact that because this lens is an unusual size, it was necessary for me to change the position of the lighting in order to photograph a subject with this and then exchange it with this, because as you can see, there's a significant difference in the way the setup would be. Not only does this sit lower, but it's shorter. So you cannot do this without also changing your lighting between shots. Even though I was very meticulous to try to make it as minimal as possible, it has to have had an effect at high magnification. The lenses are as difficult to use as you would expect an objective to be at that magnification. You have no depth of field and you have a very dark view. That makes finding your subject, finding your target and photographing it really quite difficult. And added to that, my behavior with the numeric aperture control was less than exemplary. The objective has a numeric aperture control on it, a ring. So you can set the numeric aperture anywhere from 0.1 all the way up to 0.5, which is pretty high. The numeric aperture is just a derived number that correlates to the amount of light that can be captured by the objective, the size of the cone. So as the objective numeric aperture gets higher, then more light gets in, and you end up with a brighter picture. It's true that if you close down the aperture a little bit, you can get a little more depth of field. And because the relationship between the two is squared, you can get quite a bit of improvement in your depth of field by closing down the aperture. But you need to remember that all of these optics are diffraction limited. What that means, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is that it doesn't matter how good you do everything else. You are going to get to the point where diffraction is going to limit the image quality. And that happens pretty much right away with this objective. If you do a lot of macro photography, you know that we try to keep our F number as low as possible so that we can avoid the softening of diffraction. This particular lens, the 50 times fully set up with the aperture set at 0.5, which is the maximum size of the opening, it still has an equivalent f-stop of f50. And f50 is so far into the diffraction zone that you cannot help but get a soft picture. And I struggled with this for the whole month. It's also a heavy and bulky lens system. And there are going to be a couple of drawbacks to this system that are going to be mentioned a couple of times. The most significant of those is how mechanically this is not a convenient system to use. To really bring that home to you, let me explain how you would use this. Now, I've done a separate video on exactly how you would use this in your everyday shooting if you were to get one. And I've got all the tips and tricks on how to pull that off. But when you're using the lens, you put the objective on the end of the tube lens as you would expect. This is where all the heft is in that piece. This is relatively light considering its size because it is really a large hollow tube, a large aluminum tube, but a very sturdy one. So the objective slides onto the end and then it screws into the receiver here, but it's actually this ring that it's screwing into, like so. So you tighten it with this ring. And then you have the whole lens. Now, this is a big lens. This is actually bigger than using an infinity corrected microscope objective at the same magnification. This, in fact, would be some inches longer. This particular assembly is only 88 grams, whereas the Mitutoyo 20X on the correct amount of extension plus a rail comes out to 102. So it's significantly heavier, but it's supported by a rail. This is supported by the flange of the camera. So right away you can see that there's a real problem here. Most of the weight is out at the end. So this lens wants to droop and it wants to damage your flange in the camera. So we have to find a way, if we're going to use this, to support this lens, because surprisingly, the lens system doesn't come with a support. The problem is major at 50, still significant at 35, and even the 20 needs some kind of support. I had to come up with something to use. I built 4 different support systems that individually worked okay. But it was the last one that really was significantly useful. So as you can see, there are many different ways to support these lenses. And I've been through pretty much all of them, but what I've decided works the best is to have a series of these things. This was about the 5th or 6th thing I came up with, and these have been through multiple different iterations. A lot of people have been involved in this, and these things really work. The way they work is they hold the Aurogon system straight and pointed at the subject, and it can't vary. The tube lens is held by this rubber-lined hoop, and the rubber is neoprene. So when this is tightened down, the neoprene sticks to the metal, and it will prevent it from rotating in the collar, which stops the camera from getting sideways, which is handy, but it also stops it from sliding forwards and backwards. I came up with this particular design because there was nothing that was as cheap or as easy to make and as secure when tightened as these things. And we've made many, many improvements. Currently, the most recent model that we're on has got 3 or 4 brand new additions. For example, we've added a thumb screw at the top, so this is now tool free. You don't need any tools to change the hoops. I use 4 of these on the big long lens and then go down to using 1 at 20x, but you can use them any way you want. They're made in 3 sizes. One size is 70 millimeters for the big tube. There's a middle size one, a 60 millimeter tube that's just for the 20x. And then there are the small tube is 50 millimeters diameter, which is for the objective at the front. But the point is they're lined with neoprene, so they stop the lens from rotating. They have a thumb screw, so you don't need any tools. And the one thing I would tell you is if you are thinking about making some of these, you'll want to watch my video on how to make these. It's not out yet. It'll be out in the next week. And I'll show you every step of the way, from putting the brass inserts into the base to picking the right quick release clamp. I'll tell you that right now. It has to be these Neewer. The name of them is in the description. But these little things that are shaped like this are the only ones that have this cross in the bottom. If they don't have that cross in the bottom, the 3D print won't fit, because I made it to fit this cross. It prevents it from turning, keeps this absolutely straight. If you want to build one of these with me, I'll be doing this video next week where I'll show you every step of the way. So keep your eyes open for that video and plan on joining me to learn how to get yours made for $1.20 something a piece. That is if you don't count the price of the 3D printer. They get quite expensive if you count the 3D printer. Probably the most irritating thing for most people who use infinity corrected objectives is once you have this set up on your camera and your camera's hanging off, it's on a rail, everything's stable, you want to change magnification, you screw out the objective and screw another one in and take the pictures. You're ready to go. It's at the right length. You'll have to move it just a little bit to get it back into the working distance, but otherwise it's all set. This length doesn't change. In this, it's the middle part of the lens that has to change, which means this has to come off, the new piece has to go on, and you have to put the objective back on, and that drastically changes the length of the system. So it is going to be, I think, a problem for some people who go from one magnification to another after every shot. That is actually all I have by way of negatives. The little bit of optical softening and the 2 mechanical issues, one with supporting the weight and the second with having to change out the middle bit of the system. But there are some positives that way outbalance that. The first one is the extremely cool suitcase. This comes with the lens system. And it is a wonderful way to keep lenses clean and protected. Because it is cheaper and less involved to design a very good tube lens that corrects for an objective than it is to design an objective to go on a tube lens, they have been able to put this system together at 4 magnifications for a price that seems unbelievable. If you wanted to build a system in your studio that was capable of shooting at 10, 20, 35, and 50 using a regular tube system, a decent ITL 200 tube lens, and 4 Mitutoyo objectives, 10, 20, 35, which they don't make, so I went with another brand, and 50, you're looking at a total cash outlay without a suitcase of nearly $10,000. This lens system, though I don't have the final price that it's selling for in America today, is about $1,500, is what I've been told. If that's the case, it's about $8,300 cheaper. Let's talk briefly about the results. I'm not going to go through all of the results. I'm not going to show you all of the disastrous pictures that I took as I was getting used to this. I was lucky to have some early pictures that were really good and convinced me that this was a serious lens. This was before I actually knew how the lens worked. But as time went by and I got more complacent, my pictures got worse. And only towards the end, when I started to figure out some of the do's and don'ts, did they get acceptable again. But I gathered enough information to be able to make some generalizations about what you can expect with these lenses. First of all, they are apochromatic. They don't have color fringing. Compared to my Nikon CFI lens that I used as part of this comparison, the difference is massive. Now, anytime you extend the distance of the lens from the camera, you're going to get some degree of spherical aberration. And there was, as you would expect, a little bit of that, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I expected. In fact, all 4 of these lenses were well corrected for aberration. What I did notice was that at 10 and 20 times magnification, and most of my testing was done full frame because I wanted to put this thing to the test, I saw no vignetting in any of my test shots. Probably the most important difference between the Mitutoyo at 10 and 20 and these lenses is that in the 20, there was quite a bit of softening at the very corners with the Laowa that you didn't see quite as much of with the Mitutoyo. Now, to see it, you really had to be looking at something like a computer chip. Anything that didn't have sharp edges looked just as good. But the computer chips showed some loss of detail at the very corners. And that was real and it was significant. And I saw the same thing at 35 and 50. But getting good pictures at 35 and 50 is very, very challenging. I'm more worried about what's going on at the center of the frame than I am at the edges. I need something sharp in the middle of the picture, and I had plenty of images that weren't. Remember, it's a diffraction limited system, so no matter how good you are or how careful you are and how perfect your lighting is, you're still going to end up with diffraction softening just by using this lens. A lot has happened since this video was recorded by me. Several photographers have been doing some work testing these lenses and have mapped out the modulation transfer function on these particular optics. And the results aren't surprising. They are not performing at the level of a Mitutoyo infinity corrected microscope objective. So we're looking at a system of lenses that sells for $1,500 is being compared to a set of lenses that would cost $10,000. And we're seeing that the MTF reflects the difference a little bit. So you would expect that. I am, of course, not the least bit surprised. I would not expect the MTF curve of this lens and the Mitutoyo objective to be the same. It would be improbable at best. So the fact that the difference in price, the difference in cost of making these lenses is reflected in the MTF curve is hardly surprising and shouldn't be source for concern. The point is that people who really care about these lenses are going to care about the pictures that they take, not the scores that they got on testing. Just be aware of the fact that on the basis of these results, it is not likely that the Aurogon is going to unseat Mitutoyo as the photographer's favorite objective. To look at it from a slightly different angle, I bet Mr. Lee is absolutely thrilled with the MTF curves that they did get, because I think that they vindicate his design and they confirm that it's a beautiful lens that functions at a very high level. Sure, it's not functioning at the level of a high definition Mitutoyo, but yeah, it's not priced that way either. So saying that Aurogon lenses are not as good as the Mitutoyos is like saying that my Z8 is not as good as the camera in the Hubble telescope. I know that, but it doesn't mean anything. Same thing here. The fact that the Mitutoyos are sharper, wouldn't we expect that for that money? The question is not, are they sharper? It is, are these lenses that we're looking at a good value for the money? I am going to attempt to sum up everything that I've said about this lens system for the last 4 months, which you've now heard. I think it's a wonderful system. I think it, for the right person, is going to be perfect. The question is, are you the right person? And the only way that I can really give that information to you as completely as possible will be by describing you. If you are an owner of a Mitutoyo 5X or maybe an Amscope 4X, you have enjoyed it so much you are itching to try magnifications of 10 and 20x. Maybe you've bought an Amscope 10x and you're realizing that that is not going to be the way you want to go. You want something better than that, but you can't afford $10,000 worth of Mitutoyos. This lens system is for you. You will get so much value out of it and so much fun because it is a serious, apochromatic, long working distance microscope lens that will give you fantastic pictures. You've seen my pictures. They're not fantastic, but they are as good as any that I can get with a Mitutoyo. If you are in that upper echelon of photographers and you need that extra resolution, then you know it already. In which case, don't buy this. It won't satisfy you. If you've already got the 5, the 10, the 20, and you're thinking of getting a 50, just wait till you can afford the 50 and get a 50. Because if you get this as a cheaper alternative to the 50, you won't be satisfied. Somebody will tell you about the MTF curves of these lenses not being the way you want them, and you'll be unhappy with your purchase. So don't do that. The people who will do best with these lenses don't really care what the MTF shows. They care what they see with their eyes. They care how versatile and usable this is. And yeah, you can be experimenting at high magnification for the rest of your life with this suitcase full of optics. That's who it's for. And for that person, this is a great, great bargain. It's a great deal. It's a great lens system. I hope that is fairly clear. I'm not trying to pigeonhole anybody, and I'm just trying to be as straightforward and as honest as I can be. I know a lot of you personally, and I know a lot of you would fit somewhere in this category where this should be a consideration, because my goodness, you are going to save a lot of money. And for the vast majority of us, I don't think you'll ever see a difference of any significance between the pictures you take with the Aurogon system and pictures you take with any other microscope objective. This is a good kit. It's worth the money by a long way. It was worth the money when they told me it was $3,000. I still thought for the right person, this was the right setup. There's one other thing I'm going to say before I go, and that is, if you have bought this system, take your time, take it easy, ease your way into using it. Start at the low magnification and get comfortable with it, then get good with it, then start working your way up. Don't get discouraged, and you will if you jump straight into 50. It's too difficult. You need to get there. And if you want some help, get in touch. I'll help you get there. I have been using these things more than any human being alive now, so I'm an expert of sorts. So that's all I have. Take care, and thank you so much for your support, all of you, but especially today to Susan. Thank you, Susan, for your support. I appreciate you. Good evening. Would you believe me if I told you that Laowa, with the release of the Aurogon full frame, I guess that's what FF stands for, 10 to 50 times super micro APO lens system. How did I start this sentence?